is my pleasure to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Jason from Portland, Oregon.
Good evening, my name is Jason Johnson. Invite. I need to thank Chris and Tony for picking me up and going to lunch with me. Ian, great talk. We went to lunch. We talked about his talk. He did a lot better than he was supposed to do. Austin, I've been trying to teach Austin, if somebody takes me hostage, your job is to come get me, right? And he's not doing very well at that, but he has 59 days, so hopefully tomorrow he'll do a little bit better. I don't know how this talk's gonna go. You know, Chris picked me up and we were driving to wherever we were going. We were going to a meeting. So all we've done all day is judge people, gossip, and eat, right? So it's just like being at home, right? And we're riding. She goes, man, I listened to your talk on Spotify or something like that, but I fell asleep halfway through it. I was like, oh, that's encouraging, right? That's encouraging. But, you know, if you're new here, you're wanted, welcome, and needed in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I don't say anything that has any value or any meaning, know this, that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works and God is real, right? And when I got here, I didn't know any of that. My sobriety date's 11/30/07. My sponsor's a guy named Carl. He was here last month, so I'm here to clean it up. I'm his favorite. He considers me, for Christ's sakes, Jason. So sometimes there's ways you can look at it, like that when he rubs his head like this, and he says, for Christ's sakes, Jason, I'm probably in trouble, right? I swore at a meeting, I forgot to say my sobriety or something like that. But if he goes like this, and he's like, for Christ's sakes, Jason, that means I'm on to something, right? It doesn't happen like this. It's mostly this, right? And yeah, and I am his favorite. I'm self-appointed, but you know, I'm his favorite. So let me get that cleaned up. My home group's called The Shed. We meet in Oregon City on Thursdays at noon and Thursdays at 7 o'clock at night. And if you're ever in the state of Oregon, if you're ever in the Portland area, you know anybody that needs any kind of help with alcoholism, call me, right? If you don't know my number, call the intergroup office there and just ask. And they already know. People call all the time, and so they're good with that. Because my job today, everything I have in my life, it's of value or any good as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you guys saved my life. For that, I'm truly grateful. If I say something 4 or 5 times, well, Maddie's here. She's one of my daughter's best friends. My daughter's getting married in a couple months, and they had what is it called? A wedding shower? Bridal shower at my house about 3 weeks ago, and I ran up this ladder to get this thing called an easel, which I don't know what it is. And the ladder flew out, and I fell down. I cracked my head open, broke my leg in 2 spots, right? So this is my first talk, and yeah, so Maddie's like going to judge me and report if I repeat stuff over and over again, but we'll give it a shot. Look, let's just do this and we'll get out of here. My mom and dad got divorced when I was really young, right? And I'm excited to be here, though. You know what? I've been locked up for 3 weeks in a house with people just staring at me and bringing me food like I'm dying or something like that. My mom and dad got divorced when I was really young. My dad took off. My mom was a hippie. I used to say she was an old hippie, but she was like 20. And I found out this morning at the meeting, you do have hippies in Colorado? The reason I know my mom was a hippie, she smelled like patchouli oil. Man, and I'm not saying patchouli is a bad thing, but when you're a little kid, that stuff still gives me trauma. But we lived up in the woods with a bunch of other hippies that smelled like my grandma does, or my mom does, not my grandma, holy mackerel, like my mom did. But we lived in a teepee, we lived in a school bus before it was popular, we lived in a log cabin. You know, and what I know today is my mom grew pot for a living with a bunch of other hippies. And here's the thing, man, it was a great life as a little kid, right? I was up in the woods, but here's the thing. During the day, everybody got along, but they started drinking and doing whatever they did, and they'd start beating on each other. And I'd see my mom get beat up on a regular basis. And as a little kid, I didn't know there was anything wrong with that because I see my mom telling that same person she loved him the next morning, right? It didn't make me an alcoholic, but what it did, it gave me some skills in life. Right? So that when I started feeling that tension, I learned how to de-escalate it by talking really fast, or I'd run and hide. And those are skills I took into my life. And again, I didn't know there was anything different. I had nothing to judge that by. When I started going to school, my mom moved into town and her house was a party house, right? It's one of those houses at 2 o'clock in the morning, there might be 20 people in this house, or 2 o'clock in the morning, I might be there by myself. Again, I had nothing to judge that by, right? I didn't know there was a Leave It to Beaver. I didn't know there was people read their kids' bedtime stories. I didn't know people had bath times. I didn't know things. What I learned how to do is I learned how to make macaroni and cheese on the stove. I learned how to take my own bath. And I learned how, when it got dark outside, I just pull down all the blinds in the house, turn on every single light in the house, and turn the TV up really loud. That way, if somebody came to break in, they would think there was a party going on there and they'd go kill somebody else, right? And it worked. I'm here today. But again, I didn't have anything to judge that by. I didn't know there was anything wrong with that. I was okay with that. But what happened was I was getting ready to go into the first grade, and it was a Sunday night, and I don't know if there's any grandmas in here, but I'm watching this show called Happy Days, and Patrick, you probably know what Happy Days, please, thank God. Tony does. I just spoke at a young person's thing. You can see them all Googling it, right? And according to me, you can't be on your phone in Colorado, but you can talk at a podium and not wear a tie, so I don't understand that, but I'm not judging. I'm just reporting, right? Strong sponsorship. So the phone starts ringing, and it's not like today where it goes to voicemail. It rings until that person gives up, right? Or you answer it. It rang all the way to commercial, so I figured I should probably answer, and I answered it. It was my grandma. Man, grandmas are way too invested in your life, right? They want to know, have you taken a bath? Have you eaten dinner? Do you got your clothes laid out? Stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with Happy Days. And right? And I'm just saying, yeah. And it's not like a phone that you can carry to the front room. It's in the kitchen on a wall, right? So you have to take this big long cord and look around the thing to make sure it's not back on, because I got to go, right? I got stuff going on. And finally I told Grandma I got to go. My show's back on. She says, sweetie, let me talk to your mom. I said, oh, she's not here. She's down at the tavern. The phone number is 282-4440. If you call there, this guy Floyd's going to answer the phone. Ask for Darla. She'll come to the phone and tell you she's having one more pitcher of beer and she'll be home. Right? And there was like a long pause. I was like, man, maybe 10 seconds or something. It's like, I got to go. Grandma, my show's back on. She said, give me that number again. And I gave it to her. And she said, when your show's over, I want you to go to bed. When you get up to go to school tomorrow, I want you to listen to what the teacher says and be kind to the other kids. Basically, that's what Carl tells me today, right? Just be kind to others and generous with your time. Now go, right? And I seem to get it messed up that every once in a while. But I said, okay. And I hung up that phone. And now I'm watching this show called Laverne and Shirley. And there's a knock at the door, man, and I panic. And then they start beating on the door, so I crawl underneath this coffee table and I start building the fort because I don't want to die. And then they went to the window, and I could hear them trying to get in the window, and I just knew I was going to die. And all of a sudden I hear this, Jason, open the door. It's Grandma. Man, just like that, man, I got relief, right? And I crawled out there, and I went to that front door, and I opened it. My grandma's standing there. She didn't look like Grandma. She looked like she'd been crying. She didn't have the happy-go-lucky look, right? And she says, sweetie, get your stuff. You're coming to live at my house. Man, that's like hitting the lottery. Right? Because when you go to Grandma's house, there's Rice Krispie treats, there's homemade cookies, there's popsicles in the freezer, right? There's sheets on the bed. The sheets match up pillowcases. But most importantly, there's somebody there all the time. That's an easy sell, right? So I grab my little bit of my stuff and I jump in her car. We drive to her house, and as soon as we get to her house, man, I run up these stairs and I'm running through the front room and I hear this, hey, and I turn around, it's my grandpa. He's like, what are you doing here? I was like, man, I live here now. I didn't know my grandma didn't run it by him, right? And I found that out later, but here's what he did. He looked right at me and he says, yeah, you do, buddy, come here. And he gave me a hug, and I fell asleep on that man's lap every night for the next 4 or 5 years because he made me feel safe, right? And I wasn't an easy kid. I ended up in AA. Now look, I'm the kind of kid, my grandma would take me to church on Sunday, and we'd go she'd push me in the classroom and say, he has an enthusiasm for life, and then she would take off down the hall, right? And I used to think that was kind of odd. My grandpa dropped me off in the same Sunday school class and say, he'd look at everybody, and I'd just stare at him. He'd go, look, don't let his cuteness get in the way of your common sense. He's either going to be in trouble or talking his way out of trouble, right? That's all you need to know about that kid, and then he would take off. And I used to think, that's kind of odd. But, I know now that I remember being in the 3rd grade, and we were having this thing, I don't know, they call it career day or something like that. Everybody was going to dress up on Friday what you wanted to be when you grew up. And on Wednesday, Miss Bo was going around the room, and she's asking everybody what they wanted to be. And there was like doctors, there was lawyers, there's a lot of firemen, a lot of policemen, a couple of presidents. And I remember she got to me and she said, Jason, what are you going to be when you grow up? I said, a bank robber, right? And I don't even know where that came from, right? But I couldn't switch my occupation because some of my friends quit their job and joined me. And so I had like a gang right away. And I went home with a note that day, and I came back on Friday as a rodeo clown, so I don't know where that even came from either. But I remember that Saturday after that Friday, sitting underneath the apple tree in my yard with this kid Stevie, and he was going to be a policeman, and we were talking about our jobs, and I wanted to be a bank robber. And we started talking about it, and I said, it's not fair, there's really no banks on our block so I could practice robbing. But he said, there's a Kool-Aid stand. So I got a cowboy hat, a bandana, and a BB gun, and I rode my bike up to the corner Kool-Aid stand and I robbed it. And I'm here to tell you it didn't go really well, right? They don't have any money. All they have is Kool-Aid. And but don't stress, right? I watch TV, so I know what to do. I took a kid hostage and told everybody else to go get their piggy banks and meet me in my backyard, right? Which I'm really not a good crook because everybody knew who I was anyway, right? So I took this kid back and I tied him up to the clothesline pole and waited. But here's the problem at my grandma's house, and this, they don't tell you what to do on TV when this happens, is at 5 o'clock, my grandma yells dinner. If you don't go eat, you don't eat. So I hear dinner. I was like, oh man, I didn't know what to do. So I told this kid, hey, I gotta go. I'll be back in about 20 minutes. I'll see you then, right? So I put my BB gun and my cowboy hat, my bandana and bicycle down next to him, and I went inside and everything was fine until a police officer arrived. And yeah, it's not like today where they have a police officer, like everybody gets their phones out. Back in the 70s, when a police officer arrived, the whole neighborhood came to your house, right? So all these people were in my backyard, and this kid's crying like, yeah, it was not my fault. The knots weren't that tight. He just was squirming around. But my grandpa started laughing, like really loud, right? And my grandma goes, what is so funny? He goes, man, you can't make this up. And then everybody started laughing, right? And I got grounded to the house, right? My grandma said, get in that house, you're grounded for 30 days. I'd never been grounded before, and I didn't know what grounded meant. But I started crying too, right? And so I'm walking to the house. My grandpa said, hold on a second, buddy. And he took my grandma behind the house, and they came back. He goes, here's the deal. I didn't rob that Kool-Aid stand, and I didn't tie that young man up to that clothesline pole. So there's no need to punish me by grounding you to the inside of the house, right? You're grounded to the block. And right then, that guy became my hero, right? He taught me that when you get caught, you share in a general way. Yeah, he was just a good guy, but here's the problem. As I got older, he became a problem. And I used to think it was because I thought he hated me because of when I just showed up at his house. But what I know today is he's just a decent person. He's the kind of guy that if he dropped a quarter on the ground, he'd spend $1 to get it back to you if he knew it was yours, right? He was just a good person. And as I got older, we grew apart because he would tell the police where I worked, where I lived. Yeah, he was not a very good crime partner as I got older, but he was great out the get-go. But, you know, my grandma, on the hand, I don't know if anybody has somebody in their life that just didn't give up on them, right? And I used to think when I was little, I used to think my grandma felt sorry for me, right? I thought she just... Because look, when any of my aunts and uncles went on vacation, I had to go with them, right? If I had a baseball game, everybody showed up. And the only reason they did that is because my grandma told them to, and I knew that. And so I always felt like I was just kind of just existing. But I remember when I was in the 6th grade, I started going to middle school, and I had to take a school bus back and forth from school. And you know, it's going to surprise you, but I got kicked off the school bus after 3 months, and I had to walk home, right? And it was my first day walking home, and I'm coming out of the school, and here comes my grandma. She pulls up, and I'm like, she's here to give me a ride. That's what grandmas do. And she says, sweetie, we need to go inside and talk to some people. And, you know, that's just a typical Tuesday for me. And I was like, all right. And so we go inside and we walk in, and there's a round table, and there's a teacher, a principal, a lady from a special needs school, and a couple of these counselor people. And we sat down, and my grandma and I sat on the other side, and they proceeded to tell my grandma everything I'd done wrong in the first 3 months of school, that I had no self-control, that I hit other kids, that I talked all the time, that I couldn't read or write at that level. I mean, they made it sound kind of bad, right? And my grandma wasn't saying anything. She was just sitting there, right? And I remember thinking, man, you should probably say something, right? And when they got done explaining everything I'd done wrong, she said, may I say something? And they said, yes. And she goes, look, I'm not going to deny Jason did any of those things. He lives at my house. He's a tough kid, but there's a good kid inside in there. And she pointed right at me. She goes, the reason I know there's a good kid inside there is every day before he goes to school, he runs down to Mrs. Harrington's house and he throws her newspaper up on the front porch so she doesn't have to walk down the stairs. The young man, Shane, who's simple-minded, every time I see him at the grocery store or church on Sunday, the first thing he asks is, where's Jason? Because nobody picks on him when Jason's around. And when they play sports, Jason always picks him first to be on his team. Nobody told him to do those things. He just did them, right? So I know there's a good kid inside of there. We need to tap into that, right? And I ended up having my best year of school that year, right? But I remember walking out of that classroom and looking up at my grandma for the very first time in my life, believing somebody loved me, right? I'd never felt that before. And right then, that lady became my best friend. Anywhere she went, I went. And she's that lady that rooted for me on everything. You know, that young man I tied up the clothesline pole, Sean, ended up becoming one of my best friends. So I guess I need Alan on. I took a hostage right off the bat, right? And it was a Friday night, and we were going to go over to Leif's house, and we're going to sleep in the backyard. In Oregon, you don't sleep in the backyard a lot, but you give it a shot every now and then. We're in the 6th grade. We're in the backyard setting up whatever we're going to set up to sleep outside. And Leif's mom comes out and says, hey, there's $10 on the counter. I ordered you guys a pizza. The pizza guy gets here, pay him the money, stay in the house. All the adults are going bowling, right? And when you're in the 6th grade and some adult leaves you a house with a telephone back then, it's a great time, right? And so they left, and the pizza came. We paid the guy, and we were sitting, just getting ready to eat the pizza. My friend Leigh said, hey, pizza tastes better with beer. I'd never drank beer before, but I said, yes, it does. And he went downstairs, and he got a case of Lucky Lager beer. Yeah, I'm not, some of you people, you come in here, you see you had a drink, and I'm like, I felt like I arrived. I fit in. Dude, I had to plug my nose and hang in there. That stuff was nasty. I almost swore. That stuff was nasty. And, but I hung in there, and what I found out is if you hang in there, man, your life changes, right? And so now we're in the backyard throwing rocks at cars and having a great time, right? And the damnedest thing happened, man. I got food poisoning. About 3 hours into this thing, man, I'm sicker than a dog, right? And I looked at my buddies, and I said, man, I don't feel good. I'm going home. I think there's something wrong with that pizza. And I got on my bike, and I rode my bike home, which Leif came to hear one of my talks. He said that must have been my first DUI. But I rode my bike home, and I got in. I walked up the stairs. I told my grandma I don't feel good. I went to bed, and nobody checked on me all night. Nobody came to see if I was okay. And I'm like, I'm sick, right? Something's going on here. I mean, it was miserable. And I finally fell asleep. And the next morning, I wake up, and my grandpa's at the end of this bed yelling, get up, you got to go to work. I was like, I don't feel good. He said, get up, you got to go to work. I said, I don't have a job. And he said to me, if you're going to drink like a big boy, you're going to work like a big boy. Now let's go. And I thought my grandma would do what grandmas are supposed to do, right? But as I'm walking out, she handed me a warm egg salad sandwich and a thermos of warm milk and told me, have a great day, right? And we went and picked up Leif and Sean, and we had to pick strawberries. It's against the law for anybody 12 years or younger to pick a strawberry in the state of Oregon now, and nobody's ever thanked me, right? Man, I picked strawberries, I got sick. I picked strawberries, I got sick. I think I made 27 cents the whole day. But I remember looking at my grandpa sitting on the back of the tailgate laughing, reading his paper. And I looked at my buddies and I said, man, I'm not drinking anymore. And my buddy said, Leif said, you didn't like the beer? I said, man, I don't mind the beer. I just don't want to work. So I quit cold turkey. No AA, no 12 steps, no treatment. I just stopped, right? And because that working stuff's out. In my area, I'm known as the guy who does the least amount of work for the biggest applause, right? And that started when I was young. And so I quit drinking. But here's the thing. When I got to high school is when I know the allergy kicked in for me, right? Because of step work, I know that's where the obsession did. Because of what I did, I was good at sports. I played sports on the weekends or the weekdays, and on the weekends we drank, right? But here's the deal. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I was saving my lunch money so I could pitch it in with some of my buddies so we could go shoulder tap and we could get booze to drink on the weekends. Nobody was dying of a heroin overdose. We were having a great time, right? Alcohol was fun, right? On May 5th, 1989, Carl says, I need to tell you the truth. I used to say I borrowed a motorcycle, but I stole it. And I got in a high-speed chase, and I crashed, and I ended up in this hospital, in an ICU. And I came to with just a sliding glass door, not knowing what happened, right? And I remember yelling, I'm alive. And the nurse came in. She goes, we know you're alive. And I said, you have to ask questions. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I was like, hey, what happened? She goes, oh, you're in a drunk driving accident on a motorcycle. I said, oh, I don't own a motorcycle. She goes, we know that too. And I said, did I kill anybody? She said, no. And I said, am I going to die? She said, you're not going to die, but you'll probably lose your left leg. And if you don't lose your left leg, you'll probably never walk normal again. And I remember making that decision right then and there that I'll never drink alcohol or put anything in my body ever again. But about a week or two out of getting out of that hospital, man, I had so much anxiety and so much fear that I found out that alcohol takes that away, right? So I just started drinking. I just started lowering my standards to keep up with my quality of life, right? So eventually I'm living in an abandoned house. It's one of those houses that's somebody's uncle's house until all the police come, and then nobody knows whose house it is. I don't know if they have that in Colorado, but they're frequent. Well, now they just live in tents. But, I'm in this house, and I'm doing what I have to do just to survive. Right? And, about once a month, one of my uncles would show up wherever I was at, and they made me go to a payphone. I'm like, why do I have to go to the payphone? They said, you got to call Grandma. I go, why do I got to call Grandma? They said, because she calls every hospital, every institution, every jail, and then she calls us every morning. Anybody seen Jason? Anybody know where Jason is? Is Jason alive? But somebody please go find Jason. So you need to call her and tell her you're okay, so she'll leave us alone. And I call my grandma, and I tell her, Grandma, I'm doing really good. I'm working out of town. But when I get back, I'll come visit you. Or I tell her I come see her that day. Look, I'm not a bad guy, right? But when I put alcohol in my body, I can justify and rationalize anything, right? And I would start drinking, and I would tell myself, well, I'm doing her a favor if I don't show up, because I'm not lying to her and I'm not stealing from her. And she's better off not seeing me. What I didn't know is I was killing that lady, right? She had no program. She had a God, and that was it. And that's all she prayed to. And she had to live like that. You know, every once in a while it would get really bad, and I'd go to my grandma's house, and I'd sit there and we'd talk, and I know every single time she would get up and go to the bathroom, and she'd leave $5 on a table, or she'd leave $5 sticking out of her purse, knowing I would steal it. And I'd take that money and I'd go do what I had to do, right? And I would do that over and over and over. On December 4th, 1997, my Uncle Leroy showed up at my tent. I got kicked out of an abandoned house, and I was in a tent before that's popular. And, or at least in Oregon it's popular. I don't know if it's popular here. It's kind of cold, but they don't care in Oregon. And I'm in this tent, and he shows up, and he says, hey, your grandma's been in ICU for about 2 weeks. She was on life support. They took her off of life support. You should probably come say goodbye. I said, I don't want to go. And he's a big biker guy, and so I had to go. And I remember getting in his truck, and he handed me a pint of vodka, and he said, just chug it, buddy. And I chugged that vodka, and by the time we got to that hospital, I was okay with who I was, right? I'm that kind of guy, like I tell people, even in a drug house, at the end, if there was a commercial for a treatment center came on, everybody stops what they're doing and looks at me, right? Even at my house, I'm that guy, right? I'm the guy that everybody walks around with their purse in their hand during dinner, right? I don't know why, but I have that reputation, right? And I know I'm a piece of crap, and I know I'm not going to amount to nothing, and I know I'm not anything that everybody else is. But when I put alcohol in my body, I'm okay with who I am, right? And I got off that elevator, and I got up, and I went to this. There's a big waiting room, and I have a big family, and they're all on this side. And I went to this side, and I sat over there, and nobody came over and talked to me, not even my mom. And finally, my aunt came over and said, you need to get in there, say goodbye, and get out of here. And I said, okay. And I went into there in my room, and my Uncle Gary was standing there, or sitting in there, and my Uncle John. My Uncle Gary said, man, just talk to her like she's here. Just hold her hand and take as long as you want. Don't worry about anybody else, buddy. And I said, okay. And I sat down, and I grabbed my grandma's hand. I started talking to her, and she opened her eyes. And then she started talking to me, man, and I panicked because people started running to the door because there were a couple of people in at a time, and people had flown in from all over the country to see her. And I told her, Grandma, I'm doing really good. I have a great job, man, but there's a lot of people here that would like to see you. I'll come back tomorrow and visit you. And she said, okay. And she told me she was going to pray for me, and she told me she loved me. You know, what she always does. But the thing that hurt me the most as I was walking out, she told my Uncle Gary, she said, he's a good kid. You watch, he's going to do something with his life. Man, and it just nutted up. And I went back to my tent, and I drank the way you drink. A couple of days later, my Uncle Dale showed up and let me know that my grandma had passed. And his family would come pick me up and take me to the memorial, and I could sit with them. The day of that memorial, I hid in a closet in an abandoned house with some Goldschlager and some Jägermeister, and I didn't come out. Right? And I could hear him beating on the window and beating on the door, telling me, you're going to regret this for the rest of your life. And I just didn't look. When I put alcohol in my body, I can justify and rationalize everything, right? When I drink, I can say it's okay not to go, right? I can justify not showing up, and I can do the things that you think is normal, and I didn't go, you know? And for the next 2 weeks after that, man, it just haunted me. About the last week of my run, I didn't have anything in my body, and I was desperate, and it was a Sunday, and I called my Uncle Gary Collect, and I asked him if he was going to church. He said, yeah. And I asked him if I could meet him there. We're like 8 years apart. We're like brothers. We grew up in the same house, and I knew he was going to beat me up. I just didn't think he would beat me up in church, so I thought it was a safe place. And we go to this church, and we're standing there. They start singing this song, How Great Thou Art, or something like that. And I kind of got caught up in the moment, and then they sing Amazing Grace. And I started crying. I looked at my uncle. I said, man, I think I have a drinking problem. He's like, you think? I was like, man, I might have a drug problem, too, if it makes you feel better about yourself. And the whole church went quiet, right? And I thought they'd stop for me. My aunt said the song was over. And this is what he said, buddy. He said, buddy, come over to my house. We'll shower. We'll clean you up. I'll give you $20 and you can figure out what you're going to do with your life. That's what I heard him say. I got to his house. I gave him my clothes. I took a shower. When I came out, there was a phone book. So that's like Google, the old-fashioned way. If you don't know what that is, it's a phone book. And he said, you need to look up a treatment center. You need to go to a detox or something like that. I was like, what's that? He goes, this is no time for negotiations. Look up stuff. And I said, all right. So I didn't think treatment centers were open on Sundays, right? So I called the first one, Portland Adventist. This hospital, man, they answered right away. And I told them, hey, my uncle thinks I have a drinking problem. This lady got all excited and passed me over to this other lady. And I told her, hey, I might have a drug problem. And geez, can you be here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to do an assessment? I was like, well, yeah, whatever, I guess, whatever that is, sure. So I said, okay, I'll do that. I got off the phone. I told my uncle, hey, I have this thing called an assessment tomorrow at 8 a.m. Give me $20. I'll tell you how it goes. And he said, no, you're staying the night here. Bad idea, right? He has a plastic couch. He says it's leather, but it's plastic. And he had a little dog that licked me all night. So when you're detoxing and you're sweating from the inside out and you have more than alcohol coming out of your body, it's not good, right? And when you have a little dog and you're on a plastic couch all night, it's not a great night, right? And the next morning I get up and I'm hating it. And he says, man, you need to take another shower. And I didn't want to tell him what I thought about his house, but I took another shower. And when he went to go take a shower, he remembered he had a liquor cabinet. And I went to this liquor cabinet, I got a Coke can, I poured it out, and I poured a bunch of Bacardi 151, and I started drinking it. By the time he got out of that shower, I'm ready to go to whatever this detox thing is. I'm all in, baby. We get in his truck, and we're driving, and I'm drinking my soda thing, and he goes, man, I smell alcohol. I said, it's not me, I'm going to treatment. Which sounded good to me, and he just looked at me like, you got to be shitting me. Yeah, you know? And we get to the treatment center, and man, I made a big error. I went to go hide my pop can in the bathroom underneath a bag in the garbage can because I didn't want anybody to know I was drinking going to a treatment. And he went in and he answered yes to something. And when I got in there, I got checked into this detox center. And I'm here to tell you, it was the worst detox center in the state of Oregon. And the reason is, it had no caffeine, it had no sugar, and it had no women. I'm 26 living in a tent, right? Those are big deals, right? And I didn't know you could just leave detox. I thought it was like prison, right? So yeah, I'm looking at shift changes. I'm watching the food come in and out because I'm breaking out of here. I'm counting how many seconds it is in between floors on the elevator. You know, I'm ready. I'm bailing, man. But there was like 4 other guys. It was December 29th, 1997. There was 4 other guys because not a lot of people go to treatment like right before New Year's, right? And they were talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I said, man, what's Alcoholics Anonymous, man? And they said something that just changed my life. They said there's caffeine, there's sugar, and there's women. I said, sweet, where's it at? They said, a van's going to pick us up and take us. I was like, even better, I can escape from there. Man, this whatever this is great, right? And so that night comes and this van picks us up and we're driving there. And you know, about 4 years before this went down, my dad called my mom out of the blue to pay back all the back child support he owed. I went to this bank. I saw my dad for about 30 seconds, 40 seconds. I went in there to get half my money, which I had to pay back because of sponsorship. I said hi to this guy and I left. 3 years later, I'm in this van going to this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I prayed to this God that I don't really have a relationship or even believe in. I said, God, please don't let me know anybody in this AA thing. And if I do, please don't let me owe them any money. Nothing about staying sober, nothing. I wanted to get there, find this lady. I would marry her and she'd bust me out, right? And that was my goals. And we get to this AA meeting and man, there's caffeine, there's sugar, and there's some ladies. And I'm looking around the room trying to figure out who I'm going to marry to bust me out of this detox thing, whatever I'm in. And I see this guy standing on the back wall, and I looked at these guys. I go, man, that looks like my dad. They said, you don't know who your dad is? I said, man, I've seen him one time in like 26 years. Well, there's a break in the meeting. That's why I didn't leave my seat because it makes me nervous sometimes. So I get up at this break, and I walk up to this guy. I said, hey, do you know who I am? He said, nope. I said, I think you're my dad. And he said, Jason? And I said, yeah. And I met my dad at my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it changed my life. You know, my grandma used to tell me dorky things like God never says no. He either says yes, not right now, or I got something better. God never says no. I used to think, that's got to be the dumbest thing I ever heard. It's besides participate in your prayers, right? And I thought, hey, I want to win the baseball game. You better go to practice, right? So, but I can tell you this. I remember being a little kid, like the 3rd or 4th grade, coming home on Friday, sitting on that front porch at my grandparents' house, waiting for my mom or my dad to come pick me up to take me somewhere. And I remember one Friday night, I sat on that porch until the street light came on. And nobody came to get me like usual. And I went into the house and I told my grandma, I said, I'm not going to your Sunday school thing anymore. She said, why is that? I said, I've been praying to that Jesus guy every morning and every night for my mom or dad to come pick me up to take me somewhere this weekend, and nobody showed. So I don't think he likes me, and it's a waste of my time. And she just looked at me. She said, okay. And I went in on a guy on my grandpa's lap, and I told my grandpa, I said, I don't want to sit on that front porch ever again. He said, buddy, you don't have to sit on that front porch if you don't want to ever again. And I made a decision sitting on my grandpa's lap right there. I don't need a mom and a dad, and I don't need a God. Right? As a little kid, I made that decision. 20 plus years later, I'm sitting on that front porch on a Friday night. I just got released from my jail sentence thing at the treatment center, and I'm waiting for members of Alcoholics Anonymous to pick me up and take me to my first AA meeting outside of treatment. And I'm sitting on this porch, and it's not like today where they text you or they call you and say they're coming. They would start honking their horn like 3 blocks away, right, to let everybody know we're picking Jason up to take him to AA, right? And sure enough, they pull up, and I run down there, and you know who's there to pick me up to take me to my first meeting? It's my dad. God either says yes, not right now, or I got something better. I just have to trust the process, right? He took me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous where I met this girl. I kissed her. She got pregnant. Then she got divorced, and then we got married. Yeah, and that's how I got the name For Christ's Sakes, Jason, right? Man, and I was on fire, man. I was doing one meeting a month, right? I had no sponsor. And the only reason I was doing this meeting, it was a big speaker meeting like this. It was called SSAL, Sit Down, Shut Up, and Listen. And I was the raffle chair, and I was stealing half the money, but I had to pay that too back because of sponsorship. And it was that Saturday night. It was the third Saturday of the month, and I didn't want to go, so I got in a fight with my wife and asked her for a divorce, and she said no. I didn't know you could just do that. I thought you had to get attorneys and fight it out. And she said, I'm going to the meeting. Maybe you should go. I said, screw AA. She went to the meeting, and I did what every good alcoholic does when they're going to leave AA. I went into my daughter's room. I got a big book and a Bible, and I wrote a resignation letter to Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. And I dated it, and I signed it, and I was going to take it to this guy, John B. John B., I thought, was the president of AA in Oregon because he had all these naughtigans. I don't know. They're like, you guys call them greeters or sponsees. I call them naughtigans because, like, you pull up somewhere, and they want to shake your hand all the time and hug you and touch you. And you're like, good God, not again, right? Or they call on them in a meeting. They say the damn thing. They talked about sponsorship, the allergy of the body. Stuff has absolutely nothing to do with AA when you're going once a month. But I called them all naughtigans. I didn't know there anything else. And he had a lot of them, right? And he was in charge of this big speaker, probably like Patrick is, right? He's the guy who got it. So I just thought he was the president of AA. So I walk up in front of like 600 people, and I hand him my resignation letter, and he starts reading it, and he starts laughing, like really, like Disneyland laughing, like really loud, right? All these naughtigans are swarming around, and they're passing the letter around. They still pass it around on my birthday, which is kind of disgusting, but, you know, and he goes, no. I go, what do you mean no? He goes, I'm not going to allow you to leave Alcoholics Anonymous. What accidentally came out of my mouth is, will you sponsor me? Geez, he quit laughing just like that. He's like, are you willing to go to any length for victory over alcohol? I'm like, geez, I was just resigning with a letter that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Whatever. He said, okay, this is what you're going to do, buddy. You're going to get on your knees twice a day. You're going to get on your knees in the morning. You're going to say, please help, thank you, amen. And at night, you're going to get on your knees and you're going to say, thanks. God don't need to hear any more from you. You'll be trying to con him. I was like, all right. He said, you're going to call me every morning at 6:30 in the morning. You're going to read 2 pages out of the big book for the rest of your sobriety. You're going to go to 5 meetings in 1 week, 2 where he was at. I was like, that's a little overkill. And I can't drink in between meetings, so I can't do that if I got to do all that other stuff. And so I said, okay. And within 30 days, I was the head naughtigan, right? I was self-appointed. My job in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was the head greeter, right? My job in AA was to shake every woman's hand that walked into my home group and look them in the eye and make sure they felt safe and had a safe place to go in the meeting. And every guy that walked in, I had to hug them, tell them I loved them, and I'm doing better every day in every way. Very unnecessary, very uncalled for, very awkward, right? And I mean, I'd hug the same guy like 2 or 3 times, and they just keep laughing and keeping around. And yeah, I only had that job for a little bit because I started running umbrellas out to the cars because I thought I was helping people. And I found out people, they have Bible study at that church, and they weren't really impressed with some guy running up to their car before they got out. So I became the garbage guy. But, you know, I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started doing the deal, right? And I started doing these things. But here's the thing. I don't know about anybody here, but at 9 years of sobriety, man, I couldn't stand you people. You know what I mean? You just bothered me, right? You celebrated your birthday on the same day every year. Your same family came. You know what I mean? You talked about the same stuff. When you got called on, you said the same damn thing. And so I just sat in the back and I started selling drugs. Let that sink in a little bit. That pisses them off in AA. I didn't know I was going to do that and get to be here, but I started selling drugs and I got pretty good at it, right? And I was going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was sitting in the back. I wasn't doing anything. I was just stealing a seat. And one day I did pretty good. I went to this place. I bought a car and I took it to a place called Les Schwab. I don't know if they have that. It's a tire place here. They put wheels and tires on. I pulled out and the wheel fell off. And I crashed. And they said, hey, man, that's our fault. Something happened. We'll rent you a car till we can get your car fixed. And I said, all right. So they rented me this Chrysler 300. It looked like a Rolls Royce. It was like a 2007. I thought I had arrived. I got in it. I went and met this guy that I meet every day for about a year. And I'm driving down the road and a whole bunch of, they call it a task force. Cops swarm my car, right? And yeah, it's a rent-a-car. I've only been in it twice, so I didn't know what to do with it. I had a small basketball, 157 grams of meth. So I had a small basketball size of meth. I really didn't know what to do with it, right? So I figured, well, I'll put it underneath the front seat. I have a valid driver's license, proof of insurance, and I haven't had a drink or drug in 9 years. And I go to AA. I should probably be able to talk my way out of this, right? And so I'm sitting there waiting, and everybody has a gun pointed at the car, and I'm thinking this is a little overkill. Finally, an officer walks up, and he taps on the window. I roll it down because I didn't want them to know I knew they were there. And he said, Jason, could you shut, that's a bad sign too. He didn't even ask me for my ID, right? He said, Jason, could you shut the car off and step up on the curb? And I said, man, I can do that. And I shut the car off and I open up the door, and as I'm getting out, I hear and I look down and the seat's moving back all by itself. right? You can't yell do-over or timeout, man. And it went all the way back. I never had a car with a memory seat. I didn't even know the thing did that, right? And I'm just sitting there going, you got to be kidding me, right? What the heck? And yeah, it went all the way back, and my dope's in the middle of the floor. That's not a good hiding spot, right? So I shut the door and hoped they wouldn't see it, right? Well, they did. I got charged with commercial delivery, commercial possession, racketeering, intimidation of a federal witness, and a gun charge with 9 years of sobriety going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Man, and I burned it to the ground. Burned it to the ground. I ended up on the news, and I put a needle in my arm. I ended up getting sentenced to 48 months in prison. And in that time between when I got busted, the time I got sentenced, I signed the rights away to my daughter for $20 and a ride to a drug house. My wife divorced me. She has remarried me. So, you know, when she divorced me, I thought it was a bad call. When she remarried me, everybody in AA thought it was a bad call. So I don't know what to say about that. But I just burned it to the ground. I did what I had to do. I did things I just did what you have to do. When I got sentenced to prison, my first 3 weeks were in the hole. They put you in solitary anytime you get into the prison system in Oregon to do these tests and all this stuff. And I remember being in this hole, and I was detoxing, right? And when you run like you run at the end, man, I was detoxing bad, right? I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of fear. I was scared to death. But nobody was coming to me, and I wasn't going anywhere for a while, right? And I could hear John's voice saying, you better get on your knees and pray, dummy. And I got on my knees, and I said, please help, thank you, amen. I got up in that bunk, and if I got any relief, I got back down on my knees, and I said, thanks, right? And eventually I felt a little bit better. About day 4 or 5, I was sitting on the edge of this bed looking at this steel thing above the toilet, and I could see the reflection in the mirror kind of thing. And I looked at myself, and I realized I'm a piece of crap that's not going to amount to nothing, right? I'm guilty. I am the guy. They have the right guy locked up. And I got on my knees, and I told God, I think I'm powerless over alcohol, and my life is unmanageable. I need help. I didn't tell it to anybody else. I just shared it with him. And I got back up on that bunk, and I got some relief, and I got back down on my knees, and I said, thanks. I got put into population at 3 months and 27 days. There's some judges in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in my area that signed a few pieces of paper. It got me a suspended sentence, and I got released to serve my time in the community. And I've been an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous since that day. Now, if you go to my home group, they might not say it like that, but I'm doing all right. And I'm grateful for everything I have. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And all I had to do was get out, get a job, and stay sober. And I've been doing the best I can. You know, I had a lot of stuff I had to clean up there, right? When I got locked up, my daughter was like 8. You know, and I look, I'm not the best dad in the world. And to this day, I still make mistakes, right? But I know this. My daughter, well, I think she wants to be a judge. I don't know what she wants to be now. She's marrying a fireman, so I think that's out. But she works at the courthouse, and she went to law school, so I don't know what exactly. But I remember about a year ago, I was walking through the kitchen, and there was a bunch of girls in our thing, and they were trying to talk my daughter into running for president of the United States, right? So I said, hey, can I have a cabinet position? And she said, no. She didn't even hesitate. I said, well, what can I do at the White House? She said, you could be a greeter. I was like, yeah, I might not have the job long, but you know what I mean? But in that same conversation, one of those girls asked my daughter, isn't your dad's past going to hurt what you want to be? Without skipping a beat, my daughter looked right at me and said, my dad's past is my greatest asset. That's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. She's seen me burn it down, and she's seen me build it back, right? I remember when she was 17 years old. She's 26 now. When she was 17 years old, her and my wife came to me, and they said, hey, we're going on vacation. I said, where are we going? They said, Canada. I said, I can't get into Canada. They said, we know. And away they went, right? So I'm at home dog sitting. What I found out later, you don't dog sit your own dog, but I was. And so they get home. My daughter goes straight to her room, and my wife comes in the kitchen and says, we need to talk. I said, what's up? She said, this is serious. You can't overreact. I said, oh, give it to me. I can take anything. She said, Bailey got a tattoo. I wasn't ready for that. I saw tramp stamp. I saw stripper poles. I saw Aerosmith videos. I saw red. Man, I went kind of nuts, right? I told my wife we're getting divorced. She's going to prison. I got to figure out how to get that tattoo off my daughter's back. She's ruined her life. Yeah, I said things to my wife that she just looked at me, and I went upstairs and I yelled at my daughter like you shouldn't yell at anybody, right? I said things to my daughter that if any one of you said one of those things, I have no problem going back to prison, right? But I said that to her, and she just sat there and cried, and it wasn't going really well, so I went downstairs. My wife kicked me out of the house, but really what I did is I got in my car and I called an Al-Anon, right? Because, look, this situation, if you call Alcoholics Anonymous, if I call Patrick, say I have a problem, he'll give me the solution before I'm even done explaining the problem. Did you turn it over? Did you pray about it? You write about it? Inventory, do this, trust God, turn it. Phew, I know all that, right? So I called an Al-Anon because I figured this has happened to somebody else in this program, right? And so I called the wrong Al-Anon, right? I don't know if they write it down. I don't know if they text it out. I don't know. It takes them a long time to respond. It took them like 4 or 5 miles, right? And finally she said, you know, and I know what I heard. I said, what's that? She said, man, you just told your daughter she's not beautiful. And any decision she made is not to your standard in her body. I mean, she said a lot of things that made me sound really bad. I said, man, I didn't mean any of that. She said, well, you got to go back and make that right. And I could hear her husband going, you better invite God to go with you. So I'm going like this down the things, you know. And I get back to my house and I sit in the driveway and I invite God to go with me. And I went in and I told my wife, I think I overreacted. She said, you did? And I went up my stairs and my daughter was still crying. And I got to talk to her. I told her, man, I don't care what you do with your life. I'm an idiot. I don't care what you love. If it makes you happy, it makes me happy. Right? I don't care what you believe in. I don't care who you marry. I don't care. You just need to know I love you no matter what. She goes, I know, Dad. She goes, I knew you were going to overreact. So then I became a victim. And she goes, you want to see the tattoo? Yeah, whatever. We're this far into it. She lifts up her shirt and there's an AA symbol and it says 1 day at a time. Right? And there's a hand going like this and a hand going like this. My first thought, but I said in my inside voice, God, I hope she's not an alcoholic. The second, what's with the praying hands? We're not Catholic. But I didn't say anything. She goes, you want to know what the tattoo means? I said, sure. She said, if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous, you and Mom would have never met and I wouldn't be here. I was like, that's pretty good. She said, the hand going like this is Mom's hand because she always makes the coffee and the cookies for the meeting. And the hands like this is your hand, Dad, because you're always welcoming people to Alcoholics Anonymous and give them a hand up. So now I'm on the edge of this bed crying. And this lady, Polly Pistol, said I wasn't crying. That was God kicking me in the nuts. But so I avoid that lady like the plague, right? And I was able to make that right? I can make mistakes and I can make that right. You know, the relationship with my wife, I had to do that, right? But the things that haunted me the most were the relationships I had to do when I finally did a true 8-step was the relationships I had with my grandparents, right? My grandpa was alive and I went to my grandpa's house and I told my grandpa, I said, hey, I don't know if you know this, Grandpa, but I'm in AA. He goes, everybody knows you're in AA, Jason. I said, well, you're not going to believe this, Grandpa, but I borrowed a lot of money and stole a lot of money from you and Grandma. He goes, oh, I know. I said, yeah, but I don't know how much. He says, I do, right? And he goes into my grandma's room and he brings back these spiral notebooks. My grandma was like the mob, right? From like 1972, Jason borrowed 25 cents. Jason mowed the lawn. He has 10 cents credit. Jason picked up apples at 2 cents an apple. I mean, every IOU to like 1994, right? I mean, this lady was like, who does that, right? I mean, I said, man, I can't pay all this money back. He goes, oh, I know you can't. I said, what do I do? He says, man, you just keep doing what you're doing. I said, I can do that. But it was like looking at my whole life. And I remember I was looking at it. I had a lot of doctor's appointments, you just do what you got to do to get money when you're there, right? But in 1984, it said, Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. So I asked my grandpa, hey, how do you know I stole $5 in 1984? He goes, oh, that's an easy one. Every Thursday night, I put $5 in the coffee cup in the hutch. Every Friday morning, it was gone. The only people that live here, the author of those books, you, and the guy who put the money in there. Who do you think stole it? And I thought, well, man, if you knew it, I said, if you knew it was me, Grandpa, why don't you tell me to stop? And this is the guy that I thought hated me and was always out to get me. And he said to me, Jason, stealing isn't wrong till it's wrong to you. And I'd rather you steal from me than our neighbors or your friends. And I thought that was the guy who was out to get me. And I got in my car and I called my sponsor. He said, well, how much you have to pay back? I said, nothing. So I went back and I ended up getting my grandpa cable TV till the day he died. And I remember, because he said he would never pay for TV. And I remember about 2 or 3 weeks after he got TV, he called me and we talked about every single channel. We talked about ESPN. We talked about the History Channel. We talked about the channel for 10 minutes. It just goes bong like that. He watched it to see if something was going to happen. You know what I mean? He watched every channel and then called me. And, at the end of that conversation, he said, man, this is one of the coolest things anybody's ever did for me. I got that gift, and when he died, we were good. My grandma, on the other hand, I don't know if anybody's ever had somebody in their life that just didn't give up on them or got you here or did that, and they never got to see you get sober or get this deal. And that was my grandma. And I had a lot of ache, man, and I did inventories. I wrote letters. I went to the gravesite. I looked for dragonflies, butterflies, ants, potato bugs, hummingbirds, bluebirds. I did everything you guys suggested, right? And I could get relief, but I couldn't fix that ache. Right? I drive by that cemetery, man, and it would just eat me up. Or I'd drive somewhere and I'd think about how do you treat somebody that loves you like that? And I was flying home from a convention and the guy sent me this story because I guess I'm the kind of guy, if you give me directions, I balk. But if you can tell me a story and I can feel it, you got me. And there was a story about this little boy. He was the firstborn in his family and his sisters were born and his dad started paying attention to his sisters and he got really jealous. But he knew his dad loved football, so he asked his dad, mom and dad, if he could play football, and they signed him up, and right away he knew this was a bad idea, right? He doesn't like sports. He's not a football guy. He's a trumpet guy. But after every single game and every single practice, his dad would come find him and give him a hug and tell him he loved him and how proud he was of him. So the kid just kept playing and kept playing. His senior year of his high school team was going to the state championship for the first time in school history. And they're at practice a couple weeks before the big game, and the coach calls him over at practice and says, son, I don't know how to tell you this, but your dad had a heart attack today and he didn't make it. And the kid hit his knees and started crying, and he got up and he asked the coach, is it okay if I go home a little early from school today or from practice today? The coach said, man, go home and take care of your family. This is just a game. Your responsibility is your family. Go take care of them. You know, and the big game came, and the kid didn't show up for the first half of the game. In the third quarter, he showed up, and his team's losing by a lot of points. And he runs up to the coach, and he asks the coach, is it okay if I play? And the coach says, whatever, we're losing anyway. You're the worst player. Get in there. He intercepts the ball and runs it back for a touchdown. He keeps it in there. The kid ends up winning the game, state championship for his school. The worst player in the school history just won the first state championship, right? So that night when the coach is leaving the locker room, he sees a young man sitting back there by himself. And so he walks up to him. He says, man, take as long as you want. I know it's your senior year. And he goes, thanks. He goes, man, I got to ask you something. You're not really the best athlete I've ever coached. What happened out there tonight? That was a phenomenal game of football. He said, coach, I don't know if you know this, but games that I lost the game for us, or the games that you just set me on the bench and I didn't play, no matter what, my dad would come find me and he'd give me a hug and tell me he loved me and how proud he was after every single game. And the coach said, man, you had a great dad. He goes, yeah, I did. And so the coach starting to walk away, and the young man says, coach, I don't know if you know this or not, but my dad was blind. And tonight's the first night he ever really got to see me play. And just like that, man, I got relief, because I know that every time I go into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I say, my name's Jason Johnson, I'm an alcoholic, or I need to meet a new guy, I get him a book, I get him some coffee, and I talk about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, my grandma gets to see that, right? That might not be a big deal to you, but if you're an alcoholic that's traded everything away and burned it to the ground, it's a big deal. You know, I know when I die, I'm going to go to that big meeting in the sky. The only reason I'm going there is I want to make sure there's a Bill, a Bob, and a Jesus, right? Not going there for any wisdom. And, but I know who'll be waiting in the parking lot to greet me. It'll be my grandparents, right? My grandma will probably be dancing around. My grandpa, I know what he'll do. He'll wave to me, because if you're not a half hour early, you're late. I don't know how that works when you're dead, but he'll wave at me because he thinks I never know where I'm going. But here's the deal. For the first time in my life, I'm going to be able to hug my grandpa, because I've been hugging men in Alcoholics Anonymous when it wasn't convenient or necessary. I'm going to be able to hug my grandpa and tell him I love him and thank him for giving me a safe place to live. My grandma on the day, she'll be dancing and praising Jesus and telling my grandpa, I told you so, right? And I know what she'll do. She'll hug me, she'll kiss me, she'll tell me she loved me, and she'll tell me she's proud of me. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to be able to tell my grandma's the damnedest thing. These people in this program called Alcoholics Anonymous, they found a solution to their problem, and they introduced it to me. But most importantly, Grandma, some of those people showed me some grace. In doing that, they introduced me to that kid inside of here that you only believed existed. I don't ever want to be able to pay that debt back. You know, I'm grateful for everything that Alcoholics Anonymous gave to me, but that's the greatest gift you've given me, right? Here's the crazy thing, and I'll share this with you and I'll end. You know, about a year ago, I had to go speak at this Indiana State Convention, right? And I get to this convention, and right away, I realize they got the wrong guy, right? It's one of these ones where the 5 Western states meet, and it's all the business of AA. Look, I steal meetings from Alcoholics Anonymous. I get fights in meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not a guy who should be at this event, right? So I told the guy, hey, you got the wrong guy. He's like, oh, no, we want you. I was like, nah, you got the wrong guy. Look, I'll pay for my own way home, and I'll have somebody I know come speak for you. He goes, oh, no, you're it. We picked you. But the slogan of this conference was a seat for everyone, right? So I thought, well, that'll bite him in the butt in a couple of days. Let's do it. Man, I had a blast. I went to all these meetings. I got to meet this guy that was part of the guy that when they took the AA symbol out of the big book. Yeah, I learned a bunch of history. I got to do a bunch of stuff with these guys, and I had a blast. And that night I got to speak Saturday night at the banquet. And at the end of the banquet, they have this thing called the gratitude line. I don't know why they call it a gratitude line, because sometimes there's people in there that walk up to you and say, hey, my sponsor told me I had to thank you for the hour of my life I'll never get back, right? Or there's always some little old lady, or you cuss, or, you know, people are just not really impressed with you, right? So I'm at this thing, and it's one of those ones where they're all service people, so they all want to shake your hand, right? So I'm shaking hands, but I'm hungry now, right? Because I didn't eat at the banquet. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I look to see how much longer it is, and I lock eyes with this lady. I'm like, holy crap. And I look again, and she's just staring at me. I was like, that lady don't like me. Right away, that's the one, right? So I'm like, Thank you, thank you. She should be here by now. And I look up and she's not there. And I just get relief, right? She gave up. And I look and she's at the back of the line, staring at me. And I'm like, oh. Finally it gets down, it's just her and I. She's standing there and I'm standing here and she's looking at me and I'm looking at her and she's kind of crying. I'm thinking this isn't gonna be good. And she said, I'm a grandma, can I give you a hug? I'm like, absolutely. I don't want to tell you what I was thinking, right? And so I hug her and we start talking and I found out she has a granddaughter who's 26 years old, 27 years old. And she's out there running and gunning. And she's doing a lot of bad things with her body and with her life. And her friends are saying she's doing a lot of bad things. But she's my granddaughter and I love her no matter what. As we talked, I come to find out she's not a member of Al-Anon and she's not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. The only reason she was there that night is her friend who prays for her granddaughter every Sunday at church. Her and her husband had banquet tickets. Her husband got sick and she called her about 10 minutes before the talk and asked her, do you want to go hear a story of hope? So we sat there and she goes, I want to thank you for giving me some hope, right? And I kind of got caught up in the thing. And, we said our goodbye and she's walking away. She turned around. She goes, hey, do you know why your grandma wrote all that stuff down in those books? I said, no, I asked my grandpa, and all he would do was laugh and change the channel and say no. And she goes, I know why she did it. And I go, why is that? She goes, because your grandma knew no matter all the bad stuff you were saying about yourself or all the bad stuff you were doing and what everybody was saying, no matter what, that one day you would come back and make it right. Right? And when she walked away, man, I just sat down and I started crying. Right? I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying for the gratitude I have for Alcoholics Anonymous because I felt like I just made amends to my grandma in person. I'm sitting there on my seat going like this, and I look, and there's a big guy standing there about Patrick, right? And I'm like, holy crap, right? And I get up, and he's like, I heard that. I felt that. I was like, whoa, I didn't touch you, right? You know what I mean? And he's got this big old beard. He's like, I felt everything that lady said. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, I got goosebumps, right? And I remember this guy, Howard P., telling me, he goes, if you ever ask God for something, or you ever hear somebody share and you get goosebumps or a chill feeling, that's God rubbing your back and telling you you're welcome. Or I've got this, right? And I shared that with him, and he looked at me like, you got to be kidding me, right? And he walked off, and the crazy thing is about 6 months later, I was speaking at a place in North Carolina, and it's another gratitude line, and I'm going, I get to the end, and there's this guy standing there, and he's just staring at me, and I'm staring at him. He's all clean cut, and I'm thinking, here we go. He goes, man, I'm Paul. I go, okay, Paul. He goes, you don't know who I am? I said, man, I meet a lot of people. He goes, I'm the guy in your story. I go, geez, you had a big old beard. He goes, yeah, my wife made me shave that. And it was during COVID time, right? And I was like, man, we started talking. And he said something to me, it changed my life. He said, when I met you, Jason, I had 60 days of sobriety, and I just did a second step. And I believed there was a God, but I didn't know if God knew who I was. So every morning I get on my knees and I tell God, hey, I don't know if you know who I am, but my name's Paul. And can you help me stay sober today? He said, when you told me that when I felt those goosebumps, that was God rubbing my back and telling me, I got you. He said, it changed my life. Right? If you're new here or you're old and you get that feeling or you get those goosebumps or you get that tingle, welcome. Thanks.